Hello there, I'm Nathalia Melo, your unfiltered fit BFF. Mom of two turned CEO of a fitness empire. Someone who truly understands the struggles of trying to stay fit, sane, and sexy, all while juggling work, life, and motherhood. And this is the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. Follow along wherever you're listening and join me weekly as I help busy working moms just like you simplify your fitness journey so you can lose fat, regain your confidence, and feel sexy AF. It's time to stop living in the what ifs and hiding from the cameras. It's time to regain control over your body, feel sexy naked, and wear a bikini confidently. People already see you as a super confident woman, but it's time for you to feel the same way too. Come on, let's go. Hello there, fam. Welcome to another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. I'm Nathalia Melo, your host, and today I have Coach Jen back with us. Hi, Jen.
Hey, guys.
We need a name for the segment that we like for our episode that is being like a monthly episode for the past, 3 months, 4 months? We need a name. We need a name. I know we talked about it, but we need to lock in a name.
I'm not creative, so open for suggestions.
I know. We should do something like on Instagram and like let people help us because I think we need a name. Anyway, and before we got on air, Jen, we were talking about how actually for the podcast today, we had discussed many ideas on what we were going to be covering. And literally yesterday at our meeting, we started to see almost like a common denominator. And, before we hop on, I was saying that I've seen 100% increase on this particular topic, more than I had seen the whole of the past year. And we were like, we have to talk about it.
And why? Ultimately figuring out why all of a sudden it's become so significant after so long of not seeing it.
Yeah. So the topic that we're going to be talking about today is mom guilt or life guilt and understanding what is really costing you. And the reason we want to talk about this is because Jen is hearing that. I'm hearing that a lot. It's kind of like, oh, I'm guilty to put the time aside. I'm guilty to invest in myself. And, this is one that hits very close to home, not only just for me as a mom, but for so many of the women that I talk to every day. We're talking about something that we all feel at some point, but we don't say it out loud because goodness forbid you say that you don't want to be a martyr.
Right.
That sinking guilt of like wanting to take time for ourselves, of investing in ourselves, of doing something that isn't directly for our family, because goodness forbid we have interest outside of just being a mother, a wife, and a worker. And yeah, we're exhausted, we're miserable, we're unhealthy, we're disconnected from our bodies, our partners. And ironically, the very family we're trying to show up for is getting the leftovers.
Yeah. You and I had spoken about it briefly yesterday, and I was, playing devil's advocate in amongst the conversation because I find even now at my stage of the game, running that same internal tug of war all of a sudden, whereas I thought I had put it past and behind me to where are the priorities even within myself and my ultimate personal life in connection to my children who I'm raising as a single mom. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I need to overly give to them, number one, because there is a different layer of guilt that I battle myself with, being single and divorced, and then thinking that, oh, if I mess them up for life, forget it. But then do they deserve more than me? Somehow, because they're surviving ultimately what? This life I created for them. It's just a constant tug of war. Absolutely.
But here's the thing though, doesn't it become a little bit dichotomous that you're like, do they deserve more than me? But isn't this almost like what comes first, the egg or the chicken? Because if they deserve more than you, which I think is a feeling that a lot of moms and women experience, wouldn't you showing up as the best version of yourself be giving them the most valuable thing that they can have?
Is a mom, right? The reality and the definition of what a mother is. Which then, if you think about it, is unconditional, right? So regardless of however we act through or the choices we make, there should be no conditions. And guilt is all based off of conditions. If you think about it, it's created from conditions, but we're raising our children in an unconditional love capacity. But then we're putting standards, which are conditions on self.
Yeah, and I know that for a lot of women who are listening, in the more kind of like because I know that right now we got straight into the very deep conversation, and I feel like a lot of women don't even understand that this is what they just like, oh, I have guilt. I have guilt and I have mom guilt. And I'm saying this way, and I want anybody listening to know that we're coming from a place where Jen is a single mom. She has two kids who like need her as, the primary caretaker. I have two kids as well, and I'm constantly being pulled in all directions. My husband just changed careers, so we get it. In the extent of more like self-care in health and fitness, I know that a lot of the women listening are thinking, I just want to feel good again. I want to play with my kids without needing to lie down right after, or I want to stop dodging the camera on vacation. I want to reconnect with my spouse without pretending, oh, I have a headache. It's been such a crazy day. But then the guilt kicks in. And I think it's important to unpack how all of these other things, then not taking photos, not being present, not wanting to even get out of the car to watch your kid play soccer because you're embarrassed to wear shorts. Isn't that removing or not giving your child something that for them is probably more important than the club soccer or the club whatever that they're involved in?
Well, think about it. When you're not even choosing to remove yourself from your place of quote unquote comfort because you're putting yourself into an uncomfortable position by being out on the soccer field, let's say, your child is translating that to be that my mom's actually not present. She's not watching me. She's not. So, what are you ultimately telling your child? That you don't want to watch them, that you don't want to be there with them. And when you're not taking photos with them, are you ultimately telling them that there's something wrong with them that you wouldn't want to keep that memory completely in a place of forever, if you think about it, because photos are forever.
Yeah. And there is also the layer, it's kind of like, yeah. And what I hear from a lot of women is like, oh, no, but like, I would never not go. Like, I'm there. But it's kind of like what we see, you live near the beach. I'm pretty sure that whenever you go to the beach and you look around, at least the times that I go to the beach and I look around, what I see is a whole bunch of dads playing with the kids in the water and the moms normally like sitting under the tent covered in like capris when it's a zillion degrees outside. And they're like, oh, no, I'm just tired. Really? Are you tired? Or is
Oh,
it that you don't want to get up and play and do the thing? So yes, you show up, but are you really showing up? Are you really being a part of the story or are you watching the story?
right. Exactly. You're not present. And mentally, are you even engaging in the activities, regardless if you're sitting off to the side? You're not engaging because ultimately your mind is so elsewhere, thinking about
Mm-hmm.
what do you look like, or what are you presenting as, or again, the shame that ultimately you're internalizing that translates to guilt as well.
And piggybacking on that, like the shame. And I think that even whenever we have these conversations, it can be perceived as like, oh, we're like body shaming or fat shaming. No. What
No.
we are talking about here today are very real and honest conversations that we hear. Like I hear a lot of it whenever I'm doing the calls for the applications for people that want to join the Powerhouse Academy. These are the conversations that I'm having with these women. And yet they're like, oh no, but I do it. I just like pretend it doesn't exist, but they don't realize that the fact that they're having to add that extra step of telling themselves that they need to pretend that it doesn't exist is already exhausting in it on its own.
Right. Right. And then again, you're essentially lying. So now you're
Yes.
disingenuous in the way you're presenting yourself. And how do children are the most instinctual beings, right? Toddlers
Mm-hmm.
and adolescents, they act from instinct and they act off of, that's why they always say, if you wish to learn if somebody's a genuinely good person, put a baby in front of them. They'll either gravitate towards them or they'll completely retreat from them. So when you are radiating that lie that you're telling yourself, your kids know it. And then what are you teaching them? It goes back to the episode that we recorded on what ultimately our actions dictate to our children.
100%. And one thing that I'm seeing quite a lot, it's almost like, I don't know if it's because of the landscape in which we're in as a society right now, but it's kind of like, oh no, I cannot invest. Like I literally had a conversation 2 days ago, 3 days ago, and it was someone telling me how they haven't been intimate with their husband for 5 years. 5 years. Yes, have not been intimate with their husband for 5 years. How, they, and I'm mashing a couple of the conversations here together. And then like they don't have the energy at all. It's kind of like they have to be pulled to be able to play with their kids because by the end of the day, they're exhausted.
Uh-huh.
Or they like have this beautiful vacation booked because everybody's going to have a good time, but yet they are already dreading just the thought of being in a warm place, and they're thinking about canceling the vacation and going somewhere that is not as warm so they don't have to wear shorts. So it's kind of like, what is it worth to prioritize all these kind of like quote unquote things when you're not even able to enjoy? Oh, I don't want to
Right.
invest in myself because I have guilt. And I'm like, but do you not have the guilt that, there might not be a financial attachment, which there is, and we're going to talk about it. There might not be a financial attachment to the changing of the vacation, to not being intimate with your husband for goodness know how long, for not playing with your kids. But it isn't like, aren't the memories and your quality of life a much more expensive thing? Like,
There
you
is,
know what I
it's
mean?
priceless, priceless. You can't put a price tag on those memories that has you present within them. So will you be looking back and thinking what I could have done better rather than saying you had the most fantastic time? Or are you going to think back and remember how exhausted you were or how, oh my goodness, where was I? Because I don't even remember taking that picture, but obviously I was because I wasn't in the picture. But I don't remember any of it because I was too preoccupied with thinking about how I wasn't present.
Or how uncomfortable I looked and what parts of my clothes I had to tug, or, the workout that I didn't do because I was afraid that I was going to be labeled X, Y, and Z. And I feel like there is the added pressure, I think, with women that I remember after, it's been a while, but after I had my kids, like I had people asking if my husband was babysitting my kid. I'm like, he ain't babysitting, he's being a father. Like I didn't make them kids alone.
Right.
But
Right.
there is like a husband that takes like, and I get judged on social all the time. Oh, I wonder what her kids are like. And I'm like, why? Because I make the choice to take care of myself so I can be better for them. Like, what kind of fucked up mentality is that?
But listen, my kids started in the gym with me as soon as I was able to bring them in, which was what, 6, 8 weeks. As soon as I got clearance, they were literally in the daycare. And I didn't think twice about it because I knew that I needed to be able to pick up my children. And now getting into the later stages of life, the thought process that goes hand in hand with any sort of quote unquote self care, if you want to call it that, I don't even want to call it self care. It's nurturing the relationships that we have to nurture in order to ultimately have a relationship with ourselves. But I digress on this statement. I think about how when I get to a certain age, my children will provide to me grandchildren. I want to be functional for them. I want to
Yeah.
be mobile for them, which requires me taking care of myself to a different level now.
Mm-hmm. And Jen, let me ask you this because I know, and for if you're new listening here, let me give a little bit of a background. Jen is our head coach. She is a licensed counselor, and she also works outside of working with our ladies. She also works with some young adults, teenagers, and I think that Jen offers a very good perspective, and that's part of the conversation that we had off air. Jen offers a very good perspective that I feel like as parents we don't have, which is we're just giving everything to our kids because that's where we're conditioned like that.
Yeah.
This idea of like unconditional love becoming a martyr, which I stand strongly against. I'm all for the unconditional love, but I don't think that unconditional love equals self-destruction.
Because that's conditional. That's a condition you're placing on it.
The self-destruction.
Yeah, because that's now you have a standard which is conditional. So it goes against the idea of unconditional.
So, with that, do you feel like where do you stand with the idea of unconditional love? Do you think that it is a thing, or do you think that it is becoming detrimental because it is coming at the cost of the sanity and well being of the caretaker of that child?
It's misunderstood. I think people are using it as also an excuse and they're misconstruing it. They're defining it differently. So again, they're putting conditions on unconditional concepts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's convoluted in concept if you think about it. But the idea of taking care of yourself in order to take care of others makes sense. It's logical. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not conditional. That's unconditional taking care of yourself because you can't possibly take care of others if you're not taking care of yourself. Cliche sayings such as can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I meant. It's like for me to show up better for my kids, I need to take care of me. Otherwise, like I love them unconditionally, but if I have nothing to give, I have nothing to give. So I need to take care of me.
Right. Exactly. And they're cliche because they're true.
Yeah.
But people are willing to twist them because they can't ultimately get out of their own way.
What do you mean they're willing to twist? Whenever you say that, what do you mean by that?
Well, by saying that I love my kids unconditionally, which means I overly give, continuously give until when? When does it stop? Right? To where you
Mm-hmm.
can't give anymore. You can't show up anymore because you have no energy because you've given literally everything. But then what are you teaching your children? That they're entitled to your everything, to take it all? So now you're creating an entitled sense within your children to then ultimately they're creating a conditional factor behind everything they receive.
Can you elaborate on that? Like whenever you say that they are creating a conditional for everything they receive, can you elaborate on that just so to make sure that everybody is understanding what you mean?
So the idea of unconditional means it's without boundaries, it's without borders, it's limitless, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, but when a parent is giving their absolute everything until there is no more to give, there's a finite end. There's a definite limitation. Now it's
Mm-hmm.
conditional. You have a boundary, you have a border around it. You've boxed in everything that you can give,
Mm-hmm.
but unconditional is limitless.
So I'm getting confused, and I think that the listeners might be getting confused as well. And that's what because I think I know what you mean, but I want to make sure that that we're clarifying that, because if unconditional is giving without borders, and
Mhm.
whenever we give, at some point there is going to be like an end to it, because it might be freaking death because you haven't taken care of your health, and there you go. There's the condition. You're fucking dead,
Right.
which is very true. So, like, would it be a fair statement to say that the love shouldn't be unconditional because it is not a feasible reality?
True. Yes.
Huh. Interesting. And what are the consequences that you're seeing? Because, and obviously without getting into details for confidentiality with your patients, but what are the things that we are seeing with the generation that has been just given everything? Because a parent maybe has like the guilt. Oh, I'm not gonna do this, and I'm gonna give my kid everything because that's how like I show the love. But then they forget to take care of self. And then we can go to the other extreme as well, but let's not talk about the extreme. Let's talk about the absolutely kind of like canceling out their own existence to do everything for their kids, and they're cannibalizing their own health, their own well-being, their marriage, their careers, their all the things. What are the consequences that you're seeing from young adults that have been raised in this kind of environment?
Well, ultimately, one side effect is that they then expect every single relationship that they're ultimately in, whether it's friendships or personal relationships in an intimate capacity with significant others, as they, when you get into 18, 19, 25 years old, from that age range, if you will, then every person they engage with, they expect to receive every single ounce of their being when that's not realistic. And then when they
Mm-hmm.
are faced with pushback, when they're faced with disappointment, when they're faced with any sort of challenge, they are then completely shut down. And then they feel like they're failing in some way. And then they're actually paralyzed in their process to move forward
Mm-hmm.
because they don't know what to do because they've just been given hand over fist everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it
Yeah.
lends itself to not being able to be successful in any sort of other relationship, plus then becoming successful in life.
And it's crazy because I think that a lot of the things that we're talking about, it's like people pleasing tendencies that I feel a lot of women have.
Hmm.
It might be societal, it might be just the genes, how we're born. I don't know. Like that's kind of like a bit outside the scope of this conversation, but it just is. And trying to say that it's not a thing, it's you might live in an alternative universe. It's interesting because one of the questions that I ask myself constantly, a question that I will challenge some people with sometimes whenever I'm seeing some patterns, and I'm like, you're giving everything that you got to everyone around you and you're left with nothing. How would that make you feel if your daughter felt
Um,
how you feel right now?
right.
And it never fails that the person just like, it's almost like they've been hit in the back of the head with a brick, because it really is a reality check.
because they never look to that far ahead. They want to say they're being present in the given moment, which is wonderful. We always want to live in the moment. We don't want to look that far ahead because tomorrow isn't ever promised. But at the same time, we can't help but understand that there is a tomorrow. We're going to bank on a tomorrow. We're going to positively live into tomorrow. And then we're going to have to sit there and recognize, like I mentioned earlier, I recognize my kids will give me grandkids one day, and so that might be 20 years from now, which is beautiful, but I still want to recognize that I have to tend to myself in order to be there 20 years from now.
And it's kind of like, I hardly take photos with my kids, or it's like, I have loads of photos of my kids, or it's just like the photo from the top up to hide the double chin. And like, that's literally with 75 like TikTok filters or Snapchat or whatever the fuck. And it's like, are these like, is this how you want your kids and grandkids to remember you? Like, is this how you, and the reason I think that the whole conversation started was because I've like having some conversation, people are like, because my son is in travel ice hockey and then my daughter is in like cheer, and like, we're just spending so much money on that and I cannot invest in myself. And I'm like, right. But your children are doing and going and living their best life out there, and you're nowhere to be found in any of the photos to celebrate with them and to be a part of these special moments because you don't feel good within yourself. So my kids are a priority. Like, I will always prioritize them as an investment. However, if I'm not being able to show up for them and be the cheerleader that they deserve, I become a priority because they cannot thrive without me being my best.
Right. How do you want also your children to perceive your presence? How are they seeing you? If they recognize that you are choosing to cover yourself up, if they see that you're not willing to be in the forefront and not, the center of attention, because we want to make them feel as though they are, but you are part of the attention receiving, what is that telling them subconsciously? That you're not worth what? You're not even worth their attention per se.
And I think that it goes deeper as well, Jen, because, now we're talking about the kids, but then we also have the ramification, which we both know about this, into the marriage. And then you live in this like intimateless, like a sexless marriage, or marriages with a very little intimacy in the, not the physical, just like the hanky-panky part of it, but the intimacy of conversation, of the touching, of the holding hand, like all of that is removed. I mean, this is conversation I've had with my husband. I'm like, I will not have a marriage that I don't want my children to look and be like, that
Yes.
right there. That's awesome. And the moment that we're removing a big part of what a marriage is, which is intimacy, because otherwise you have a roommate.
Yep.
You start to grow apart. I don't care what anybody says, you just do. Because somebody feels rejected.
Yep. And what I think a lot of parents start to do is they rationalize and say, but we're giving our children everything else. But what you're not understanding is you are also teaching your children everything. And what you're teaching them is that a marriage without love, without intimacy is okay. And that's not okay, because we know that that's a void inside of you. But you're just justifying your actions because you, again, can't get out of your own way to recognize that you've neglected yourself thus far.
1,000,000,000%. And that's something that, like, I have conversations with Roger as well, because we used to have a joke. I would say, I love you. And he would be like, thanks. Just at being funny and ridiculous. And it became almost like a joke. But then we started to see Chloe mimic that. I would say, Chloe, I love you. And then she's like, thanks. Because Roger would do it to be funny.
Yeah.
But she was picking up the behavior and seeing that as normal. So we had to have a conversation. I'm like, I know you're joking, but we need to change the language because I don't want her to think that is, she doesn't understand the difference between humor or, we're being funny.
Yep.
And I don't want her to think that this is how a relationship is.
Right.
And this is a very silly example of how we see them replicating our behaviors. Like, what we are talking is much more serious shit.
It is. And again, just always remember, you teach your children everything from the moment they are born. You teach them how to hold a fork to eat. You teach them how to go to the bathroom. You teach them how to dress themselves. What makes you think you're not teaching them how to take care of themselves ultimately, personally, and then intimately with their significant other going forward? And then that does translate to how much they love and respect themselves too.
And it's interesting because we have members who are, in their 60s, late 50s, 60s, 60 plus. And I was actually talking to Roger about this. It is crazy to me how we will speak with these members of ours who are like more mature, and they will remember episodes and things that their parents said to them when they were like 6 or 7. And it stays with them. And what I'm finding is that more of like our generation now, which would be the kids of these parents, are like, oh, but I don't say anything to my kids, but they're watching, which is something that we completely covered in the other episode that we did. But I think it all comes down to that. I feel like people are trying to justify the behavior by being like, oh no, but I tell them they're beautiful. And I'm like, but you don't feel beautiful.
Right.
And you're always wearing baggy shit. So do you think they don't realize that?
Right. Exactly. You could sit there and speak affirmations into their ear all you want as they're brushing their hair and you're beautiful, you're powerful, you are strong. But are you? If you were to sit there and say that to yourself, could you look at yourself in the mirror and honestly say, yeah, I'm beautiful, I'm powerful, I'm strong, I'm courageous. You're not courageous if
Mm-hmm.
you're not taking those steps to take care of yourself properly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, when we had this conversation, one of the things that you said, playing devil's advocate, was like, oh no, because kids in sports, it kind of like pays off with scholarships and things like that. I got the data because I'm like, that's my wheelhouse. So I got some examples of sports here. These numbers are going to blow your mind. Actually, they might not because your kids are in sports too. But check this out: baseball and softball cost between $3,000 and $8,000 plus a year. Soccer
No.
between 2,500 and 10,000. Oh wait, it's get worse. Hockey, ice hockey between 5 and 15 grand plus a year. Cheer, dance, gymnastics, you're looking upwards to 12 grand. Okay. And then whenever you start to get granular with like ice hockey and gymnastics, it's like looking more like 20 grand, depending at what level and how much traveling is involved. Right. So
Absolutely.
then I'm like, okay, let's look about the cost benefit. Like if we want to rationalize things, let's do it. Let's look at the data. So only 7% of US high school athletes, high school, we're not even talking about the 7-year-old who is in Little League and fucking hates baseball. And the parents are paying for all the extra, like my son, he does not like soccer. Like it's not his thing. I'm not going to be investing in like $500 a week camps for him because he ain't making it. He might make as like a coder for websites, but soccer is not going to be his thing. But here, only 7% of US high school athletes go on to play at any college level. 7%. Of those, only 2% receive any athletic scholarship. Any. And this is from a source from the NCAA, scholarship statistics. Okay. So the average NCAA athletic scholarship is around 17,000 a year for men and 18,000 for women. If you're looking at a family in a travel sports commonly spending, like let's say between 3 and 10 grand, and it gets better. So let's average out at a 10.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, that's 100 grand.
Mm-hmm. 4 years at 18 grand, let's say, playing again, going the higher end. We'll be conservative and play the higher end with this one. You're only at 52 grand, so you're still in the red.
Right. And again, you cannot put a price tag on the experiences and all of that and like the life skills that sports teach you. I'm all about it. But to say that, which I know that the scholarship piece is something that a lot of people justify to put themselves last and to spend all this money. Oh, because my kid does tennis and my kid does that. And there's like 17 different sports. I know how much sports they cost. My kids are in sports. Your kids are in sports.
Well, that was the conversation we had yesterday. I said that to you. And I said, but that's where my mind has started to go because, of course, here I am thinking about it, putting myself in that position to be like, okay, well, my kids, I have to pay for X, Y, and Z. And how am I going to ultimately do that and then also pay for myself the cost to benefit, right? What is the return that's going to be received? I'm hopeful that my kids will ultimately receive a full ride. Hopeful, but is it realistic? Am I looking at them through rose-colored glasses?
the data is not looking very good. And I'm like, I mean, Chloe's a phenomenal athlete, but we have to look at the data. It's kind of like whenever I'm speaking with someone who has continuously gained weight over the years, and I'm like, where are you going to be in 6 months' time? They're like, well, I'm going to have lost 10 pounds. And I'm like, doing the same thing that made you gain 20? The fuck are
Right.
we going to do that?
Right. You have to look realistically and take off the rose-colored glasses. And that's definitely perspective for me to realize, right? And that's something to share. And people need to ultimately rationalize. Again, same thing. Are your travels going to be ultimately worth your unhappiness? And then the loss of your marriage, because that's something else.
Got data on that.
I can say with confidence that I work with a very good number of young adults. And the parents stayed ultimately together until the kids did go off to college, because then they thought their kids would be on their own. And then they ultimately got divorced because they did not nurture their marriage the entire time, because they were too busy giving to their children, giving to their children, giving to their children. And then all of a sudden now, okay, the kids go off to college. They decide to ultimately split ways. Then they backtrack and say, I never took care of myself in the 20 years I was married and raising my kids. Now they're completely neglecting their young adult children. So we have a constant domino effect that it never ends. And now you're adding insult to injury with now your young adult children that are feeling inadequate of your love at this age of the game, which is 10 times harder to fix. And this is why I'm so busy with young adults. Tired. I'm sorry.
So, and if we want to talk numbers, I got data on that. The average cost of a divorce in the US is about $15,000 to $20,000 per person, but it can vary widely.
Yeah.
So, the only person that makes money in a divorce are the attorneys.
I was just gonna say the lawyers.
Period. You know what I'm saying? So if you're trying to rationalize about being guilty, like this is, and I'm just giving the hard data, but we also need to talk about the data that we cannot, that cannot be tracked,
Right.
like the emotional well-being of everybody involved. Like you can't
Right.
put a price tag on that.
And, if you want to talk about mom guilt,
Yeah.
you have mom guilt, but did you ever recognize that you're the one creating the mom guilt?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that we can even talk about the guilt, because the way I like to, that I'm very objective on the way that I operate, which I think that that's why it creates a very good dynamic. Like I solve problems. Even whenever my mom came to me with her cancer diagnosis, I'm like, okay, how can we that's my way of dealing with things. Like, how can we make this as logical as possible? What are the things that we can do in a proactive manner? Like, that's how I deal with things. So that's my mechanism. So if we're talking about, oh, I feel guilty because of my work. Like that's another thing. I feel guilty to take time aside because my work and I need to work and I cannot justify investing in taking care of my body because of my work. Let's not go far with one of our members, Julie, a 200% pay increase since joining us. And Julie is one. Love you, Julie, if you're listening. We love you. But Julie is one, and I know she's not going to mind us saying this, who experienced a lot of guilt in the beginning for putting time aside for herself.
Oh, yeah. Because she dedicated her entire life. But again, how much harder did it make in the beginning to break through those barriers, to break down those walls, to ultimately then realize how much more beneficial it is to just do it? And what would her piece of advice be to the younger moms? Start now.
Right. It has been, because we have interviewed her and I have asked, what would you be your advice to people? She's like, start now and don't try to be everything for everyone. And I'm paraphrasing what she said, but in so many words, and it's interesting because a lot of the things that she said in the process, and now she's like, I'm going on vacation. I don't care. Y'all need me. I'm not going to stop living my life and living my best life because everybody else has depended on me for every single thing. Yeah. And this level of independence is beautiful to watch because now she's truly being able to live her best life.
Mm-hmm. But, you do have to sit there and think, does she have thoughts? And I'm actually going to ask her now, does she ever do the what if? And we don't want people to do the what if, right? Whenever we're working with younger moms, don't do the what if.
What do you mean by that? What if?
What if she started earlier? What if she was able to sit there and show her kids from the beginning? And what if she took care of herself from younger years? These memories would have been created with her kids.
Well, I think that the only thing that we can take from that, like the what ifs, is to use that as power and knowledge for the next person so this doesn't continue to happen. And I think that that is the purpose of this podcast right here, because I feel like you have the young adults. We have the experience with the moms and the grandparents and the ladies who have gone through the process and are seeing how life has changed now. So we have many different perspectives. And that's why, I might even sound angry talking about it, because it really is a topic that I'm so passionate about, because I see so many women missing out on so much of life because they're letting this guilt haunt them. And it breaks my heart.
The other thing you're doing is you're pushing your kids to understand the idea of discipline and responsibility, and then like self-respect to find that discipline within the craft that you're basically pushing them into. If you think about it, I mean, how many kids want to spend 20 hours a week doing gymnastics or doing, do they find joy in it? It's probably all they've known because you put them into it at such a young age because they showed some sort of interest. But I'm not going to start there. I'm not going to go there. I can say again, and I'm going to use myself an example because I can speak to it. The discipline that I took upon myself to make sure that I was constantly taking care of myself, even up until this morning at 4:15, has now trickled down into my child who wants to push further in his boxing career. My 14-year-old gets up at 5:30 in the morning to run every day. I don't tell him to. I don't force him to. But again, they learn from us. So if you're feeling that guilt, you are resonating that guilt, you're radiating that guilt, and they're going to feel that guilt. What do you want your children to display? What do you want your children to understand? What do you want your children to learn from you?
And it's so interesting that you're saying something else just came to my mind, because we also have like a level of, and again, this is coming from a place of love. I do not want anybody to listen to this and feel like they're being judged. We're speaking to you and trying to shake you to bring some sense so you can start taking care of you. Now, let me go to what I was going to say before I forget. We have like parents enrolling their kids in 15 different thousand sports, especially at a young age. The biggest lesson about sports is what? It's not necessarily the winning, although mama ain't raising no losers, but like, you know what I'm saying? But like, it's not just the winning, is the discipline to show up, is the resilience to get back up when when you don't win. How do you come back better? How do you improve? And I know that you've lived that with your child, and we're living this with Chloe as well, like to show up for the practice, to be the first one to get there, the last to leave, because we're nurturing not the win and lose, we're nurturing the work ethic. So how is it that a parent that does not do anything for themselves and does not show any level of discipline, physical resilience, and even in the sense of like, okay, I might have messed up my diet here, I might have missed this one day of my workout, but I can get back tomorrow, and I'm going to go back strong, and I'm not going to beat myself up over it. How is it that you are going to be able to look your child into the eye and tell them to be more disciplined, to have more resilience, to, just practice a little bit more, to not let one defeat be the end of them, when you cannot even do it yourself? What the fuck?
Be coachable. Teamwork, right? Be a part of learning, the learning process, but you're not willing to learn for yourself.
Right? You're telling your kid, hey, be coachable, listen to the coach. And then you're not willing to listen to someone who has experience and is telling you, hey, like, this is the way, this is how you can get better. No, that's not the way I do it. The fuck? Like, have you gotten results? Because if you're stuck, it's not working.
And what is that guilt telling you? That ultimately, you're lying to yourself. That's what guilt is. It's a byproduct of lies. It's a byproduct of dishonesty. So you've been lying to yourself, but you don't wish to admit it because it's harder to ultimately admit fault and then take responsibility for self. But in reality, what it's going to do is then show everyone around you that you're worth taking care of yourself. So then you're going to receive respect, then also give more respect as well. It's a compounding effect on so many layers, so many layers.
And I think it all comes back to the example that you are giving. And just real quick, because I think that this data is so mind-blowing as well. Whenever we were talking about the career, I just saw it here on my screen again. Whenever we're talking about career. And again, I'm going to rephrase this with saying, this is not about body shaming. This is not about fat shaming. This is not about being, this person is better than the other. Don't shoot the messenger. This is the research.
Wow.
So whenever you look at the research, okay, according to a 2014 study published in the Journal of Economic Psychology, people who rate themselves as more confident, and I'm not talking about the rate themselves as confident, the fake until you make it kind of folks. Oh, I'm super confident. Walk into the room and I'm just like, yeah, but you spend about 30 minutes of your morning trying to find the clothes that are going to make you hide the best. That's not confidence. You're faking until you make it.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, more confident earn between 10 and 30% more than those that don't. Let me keep on going. A career builder survey found that 77% of employers said that appearance can affect promotion. Employees who are perceived as more put together or fit. And again, we're not saying that this is right or wrong. This is not an opinion piece. I am reporting what the thing says.
Uh-huh.
Employees who are perceived as more put together or fit are often seen as more disciplined, capable, and high performing. Whether fair or not, that's a different conversation. We're not talking about that.
Uh-huh.
But it's kind of like we cannot pretend that facts are not the facts. Whether it's morally correct, that's a separate conversation. We're not talking about morality. We're talking about what is.
It's logical, which is why it's factual.
Yeah, and the discussion whether it's not whether, like, and I think that that's something that I want to make it very clear that this isn't a conversation whether it's right or wrong. It's not for us to decide. But if we're looking at 77% of folks saying it, that is like over 3/4.
But you can't say it doesn't make sense because it does.
100%. There was a research that I read once that was the people. It's old. And I think it was one of the first ones to be done about this, but that people that showed up presenting themselves better and that looked like they took care of themselves, they were more likely not only to get hired, but to get a better pay.
Sure, because they were worth essentially more because they knew their worth as well. But how do you justify your own self-worth unless you're taking care of yourself properly, which is, it's multifaceted.
And that's the thing that I think it comes back down to the guilt. It's like, oh, I have guilt because I have all these projects and I'm not going to have the time and I have to, but like my work is so demanding. And like we've heard from members, I don't feel like I get paid enough. But your confidence, an investment in your confidence is going to allow you to put yourself out there like the bad bitch that you are and like scream from the rooftops that you are a bad bitch and that you're worthy of a raise. And if you don't want it, take it or leave it later.
Right. So, I mean, think about it. If you were to, let's say, for a completely superficial reasons, but people can possibly relate, you invest in some sort of real flashy car. Men might even be able to, you drive that with a level of confidence that's like, yeah, this is my piece, right? That's an investment. But then what happens when you step out of that car? So you don't, but you put all that money and you drive with this air of arrogance, if you will.
And that is another piece of the puzzle because that's something that we see a lot. And I think especially in the area that you see a lot of women specifically overcompensating a lack of confidence within themselves by throwing diamonds, by throwing Louis Vuitton bags, by throwing Chanel bags, by throwing Hermes bags, like Celine, like all of it. And they have that perceived confidence whenever they're holding the bag. But the moment you put the bag aside, you don't walk the same way. And we see this. We've had members talk about it in our community. So is that false? Listen, I love getting my nails done. But it is a different kind of confidence that you have when it's just the nails over a confidence from within.
Yep.
From your heart.
Yep. Because all of that is faking it to make it. And you're lying to yourself.
What do you think is the solution, Jen? Because, I think that we talked a lot about the problems, and I don't know if there is an objective solution other than like presenting the data and things like that. But what do you think is the solution for women to understand that like taking care of their health and of their body is not a guilt-worthy event and that they are worthy of an investment more so probably than the 27,000 activities that they're enrolling their kids on that is bankrupting their families. Like, how do we solve this?
Well, hopefully, obviously listening to the conversation we had will bring some light to just open up the flow of conversation with those that have been there that can give you pieces of advice and maybe pushing your ego aside, taking a step back from your pride driven life, if you will, and recognize that it's a simple step. It's a simple conversation. Try, just try. Take the initial investment for a short period of time because you'll never prove to yourself without ultimately trying. But what you're continuing to do is denying yourself the opportunity to even learn. Now, again, we grow continuously through life. Every single phase of life is a growth process, and we have to learn at every
Mm-hmm.
single turn. What are you learning if you're not even willing to try a different direction or pivot your perspective? So the solution, in my opinion, would be just open the door to communicate, to a conversation. Just have a conversation first with somebody who knows, who's been there, and who has worked with all walks of life.
Yeah, no, and I love that. And what would you say? Because I feel like a lot of times is you don't know what you don't know.
Uh-huh.
And I know that sounds redundant and crazy. So I feel like a lot of women are doing all these things to be the best version of themselves that they can be. So what are the things that they could start asking themselves to see if they fit this category, these women that like this, almost like what are the questions that they should ask themselves to do as an assessment? What questions should they be asking themselves about their own behavior to even realize whether or not they are doing this unintentionally? Because I think that very few women are actually self-aware about what they're doing. A lot of them just do it like without thinking. So what should they be asking themselves?
How about actually journaling? How about actually do the data for themselves, create the budget for themselves? Like I'm sure they have a house budget, but have you taken stock and ultimately what that translates to for your greater purpose? Now taking the data that you provided, have they ever ultimately created a business plan for their future
Mm-hmm.
once the kids are out? Have you taken a business plan and created one for you and your husband as you move through the next phase of life with your children or without
Mm-hmm.
your children once they're grown? That's another thing too. A lot of people want to continually romanticize every phase of life, whether it's raising their kids or in their marriage. They don't look at it as though it is ultimately. They don't want to look at it in a corporate sense. So they don't want to put a business perspective to it, but you have to because there's responsibilities to it all, right? So put a business plan to it, put it on paper so you can visually see it, because once you visualize it on a piece of paper, it's a whole different perspective that it offers.
Yeah, I think that I 100% agree. I think that it's almost like we might need a deeper question than that, because I find that women are very good at bullshitting themselves. And we know that. So it's kind of like, oh, we're going on this amazing, European vacation, stopping in Disney and then going to, 3 weeks away in Europe and like road tripping and stuff like that. And oh my goodness, I'm so uncomfortable in my body. I don't know how I'm going to be walking around. Oh my God, I'm so uncomfortable in my body that I don't even want to put a swimming suit on when I'm in the freaking Mediterranean. And it's like, is it really worth putting everybody's like happiness? Everybody's going to have a good time and you're going to be fucking miserable. But they're trying to convince themselves that it's like, oh, but it's just going to be so good. It's going to be good for who? It's not going to be good for you. Because if you're already bitching from now, like you're just gonna be bitching and being more miserable in another part of the world after spending thousands and thousands of dollars. Like, what the fuck? Do you see what I'm saying?
I do. I do. And how to hit home with the ultimate questioning behind that thought process. How do you hit home? Is it one of those things that almost like an addict, you have to wait until they hit rock bottom before they is that the perspective you have to present to them? So do you have to be in the place where your husband, listen, I'm going to get a little gritty with it, but where your husband, you caught him cheating on you because you weren't being intimate with him because you were ashamed of your body? Or, okay, great. So you're putting lipstick on a pig, right?
And can I just open it's a shitty behavior. Whatever Jen described, like cheating on you because you don't feel good in your body. It's a shady behavior by the person. But we've seen this repeatedly. So
It's a
pretending
reality.
that it doesn't exist, like throw the whole man away. Throw the whole man away. You're missing nothing. But that leaves an impact in you, like you are the problem.
Uh-huh.
So what if and maybe it's a matter of regaining your confidence. So you walk away from somebody who is superficial and, who doesn't really give a shit about you. And you find somebody who finds you worthy. But it all comes from having that level of confidence.
How will they find you worthy if you don't take care of yourself to a level of the worth that you are?
Yep.
So yeah, it's a real horrible, absolutely immoral behavior. But is it the reality sometimes that you'll face? Absolutely. And you can sit there and continually book those vacations like you speak about and continually paint this picture that you're living this happy-go-lucky life where you're shuttling your kids from all over the place from one activity to the next. Now I ask, is your marriage sustaining those activities as well? Is your husband with you with them, or is he elsewhere?
Or are you even there yourself?
Right. All of it. All of it.
And I think that these are the difficult conversations that we have to have. And I think that we're living in a time that I wish we could talk about a lot of these things without having to put the parentheses about acknowledging that a lot of these things, we know that they're morally wrong.
Uh-huh.
But just because something is morally wrong, it does not mean that they don't happen. And we see this every single day. And it's not right. We know it's not right. It's hurtful. But whenever you feel good about yourself, even in the event that something like this happens, you're able to walk away with your head held high because you know that it's his loss.
Right.
Not yours.
Now I leave you with this question. Would someone treat you in that way and take advantage of you and your presence and your being if you ultimately showed up with that layer of confidence, with that level of knowing that you are worth their time, that they desire you, that they want to be present with you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that they would treat you in such a way if you were presenting yourself in a different manner?
Yeah. And listen, Jennifer Lopez got cheated on. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so it happens. However, like whenever we're talking real life and desires and intimacy in a relationship and all of that, we're not talking about hashtag relationship goals for the gram. We're talking about the day-to-day intimacy of feeling comfortable having the conversations, of being open and honest, of, like we had I had the interview with Matt and Brittany, where one of the things that he said is like, I couldn't even touch her. And that was pushing us apart. I appreciate a man who can speak openly about that, and not because he was shaming her, but because he missed his wife.
Right. And he wants to desire her, and he does desire her.
Yes.
And what does that do for the wife? Oh, it makes her feel so beautiful inside. And then
right. And it's just kind of like, it just becomes a positive snowball effect of like that everybody benefits from. And I literally get goosebumps because I was in that first call with them. And again, both amazing people. Were not in any way, shape, and form insinuating that like there was anything wrong or that either one of them was doing anything wrong. It's just more from the perspective that a good man will acknowledge that something is not right.
Yeah.
And we will assure his wife, listen, I know that you're experiencing guilt for X, Y, and Z. Maybe it's the investment. Maybe it's the time. I support you. I'm here for you. Go take care of yourself. And whenever you remove that guilt and you invest the time and you invest the money in yourself, it pours back into the relationship with your spouse and with your kids.
Mm-hmm. And everybody receives. It is cyclical.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Any final words, Jen, before we wrap up?
Don't do the what if.
Yeah, there is. I'm gonna leave with a quote. It's a Chinese proverb. You probably have heard this. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. That's it. That's all we need. All right, ladies, thank you so much for listening. Make sure that you leave your comments, leave a review. Let us know what is the next topic that you want us to talk about. Send me a message on the gram, or we have the fan mail link in the show notes. Send a fan mail about something that you'd like Jen and I to talk about. And if you have any suggestions for what we should call these episodes, holler. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in this week. But let me ask you, what was your aha moment in today's episode? I would love to know. You can leave me a comment at the link in the show description. You can also follow me on social media, Instagram. Links are down below as well. And let me know what topics you want to hear more about or who I should have on the show. This is it for today, guys. I'll see you back next week for another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast.